Absolutely. So in kettlebell sport, I would say some of the smaller things that happened that carried me like that were reoccurring during the entirety of my competitive career was like just a low back achiness. You know, a lot of times what people don't understand is, well, I did share kettlebell sport, you know, what it is, the events and such, but there are specific compensation strategies that we use posturally in kettlebell sport that are not necessarily ideal for just overall biomechanics and just function of the spine and the body. And so, but these are legit strategies that we use because otherwise, and I tried this when I was in the rehab journey working with Paul, and I had went to Paul, the major injury was a compartment syndrome in my left arm. So I had what was called arm pump. So I would lose all feeling. It'd be incredibly painful. My left forearm would swell and fill with blood, and I would be forced to set the bells down. Now, what we also learned is there was a bunch of other factors going on as well in my body. But one of the things is the compensation strategy that we use is essentially in the rack position, which is that middle position for those who may not be familiar. When you clean the bells to your chest, that is what's considered the rack position. And even though anyone who's lifted kettlebells, and you know this, Lee, the rack position is not a rest position. And that is really one of the only places, that and overhead, where we get some moments of rest. But that being said, is there's a strategy where we learn to relax our shoulders down and basically settle our elbows right on the iliac crest. So the bones of the upper pelvis, that crest there, we set it there. But in order to get that, due to everyone's difference in size and body length and arm length and torso length, we have to contort our spines. We have to basically go into excessive kyphosis to round and drop the shoulders down. And essentially what you're doing is when the elbows hit that pelvis, you're actually trying to turn off or disengage the shoulders so they can get even a few seconds of rest before you engage and do the next repetition. So what I really learned is when you're in that position, one, the rounding of the shoulder, the increased kyphosis, it basically constricts or blocks, has the ability to block the brachial plexus. And so there's this triangle, as you know very well, Lee, that's right around the neck, and that feeds like the nerves to the hand and the arms. And so what I was finding is I was staying so much in the posture of my sport. I was, quote unquote, living in my sport as opposed to playing my sport for many years and then doing everything I could to help balance my body. And so when I worked with Paul, first we tried to do a completely different 180 lifting strategy. And while that made me very athletic and very strong, it didn't really help me like compete with the highest level from a competitive sense. And so the journey was, and it was a really challenging one, was how can I play my sport but not live in it? How can I also modify my technique slightly to take the best of both worlds, but also be very realistic that if I'm going to compete in this sport, I'm going to have to spend a shit ton of time taking care of my body and doing so many things to balance. So I was doing a lot of Swiss ball training. I was doing a lot of sensory deprivation tank floating sessions. I was getting a lot of body work. So I was doing a lot of the work outside to help offset the stress of the sport. But really it was the arm pump that was the trigger for me that sent me to Paul to start really diving deeper in a lot of this stuff.